My name is Jed. I work in the Discovery Services slash reference department here at the library. Thank you all for coming today. In today's program, we're going to be looking at kind of social media organizations and a little bit about how they work and kind of some of the dangers that can happen on them and some ways that you can kind of fact check and make sure that you're kind of aware of what you're going into. So I am going to have a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to run through. I am going to be asking questions. I'd love to have people either answer or if you want to type a response in the chat, you can do that. Does everyone know how to unmute their audio so that if you want to say something, you can do that? Does anyone have any questions about that? There should be a little mute or unmute icon on your screen where you can click on it if you want to talk. Does anybody have any questions about that? And again, there's also the chat window where you can type in responses if you want to do it that way. Anybody have any questions about that before I get started? And it looks like everybody's got their video off, which is good as well. All right, well, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you do have any questions at any time, feel free to, again, either type them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and shout it out. I definitely don't mind at all being interrupted. And, I want to make sure everyone's got a chance to ask their questions, everything. And we'll have some time at the end as well to go over any questions that you might have. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and we'll go through kind of the presentation here. Okay, welcome. So just a few kind of technical things here. So again, if you have any questions about anything, again, please feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself if you have any questions. And again, there's instructions there for turning your video off if you want to do that as well. Okay, so my first question is, what is social media? That's a term that kind of gets thrown out there. Does anybody have any kind of want to make a run at a suggestion for a definition? Anybody have any idea of what social media means? Before I get into like a formal definition. Anyone brave out there? No takers? All right. According to the dictionary, we have, I gotta move my little window here. There we go. Social media are forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users can create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content. So I think one of the important things about this definition here is that, again, it's an idea of networking and creating online communities. So most of the content that you're going to see on social media is shared by the people who are members of these communities, and they can share all sorts of other content, which they mentioned there as well. So some social media sites will, focus on videos, pictures, things like that. So there's a lot of different types of content that are can be viewed in social media. And again, it's that idea, and this is kind of a more recent development in the internet of people who are members of the community generating the content, rather than kind of traditional media where a newspaper, the journalists write the article and the people read it, and there's not much interaction between the people who are reading the media and the people who are producing it. Okay, so again, please feel free to chime in here. Does anyone know any social media companies? Just throw out any social media companies that you might be aware of. Good. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Instagram.
Yep, Instagram. That's a good one. How about any others?
Facebook.
Uh-huh. Any other ones?
Parler.
Instagram. Parler, yep. Any others?
Twitter.
Twitter, yep. Anyone else? Okay. So yeah, some of these that you've mentioned here are here. So Facebook is obviously one that's very popular and has been around for, is one of the oldest of all of these different social media companies. You know, Facebook lets you do longer posts. You can post all sorts of stuff on Facebook, videos, images. Lots of organizations and groups use Facebook to communicate with their followers and to organize amongst themselves. The library has a Facebook page. So it's a pretty versatile social media company. There's a lot of different things you can do in there. Another one that someone mentioned is Twitter. Twitter is a little bit different from Facebook because they limit the number of characters that you can type. So in Twitter, you only get 280 characters. You can, however, post short videos and images as well. And again, the idea when Twitter got started, they wanted it to be kind of a more of an instantaneous, quick, pop off your thoughts, kind of breaking news, what's going on right now type of social media organization. Google is maybe technically a social media company. It's more of a search engine, but a lot of what they do is kind of powers some of the things that social media companies do, and is going to relate to some of the things that we're going to talk about. YouTube is for videos. It is owned by Google, so that's another way that they're relevant there. And there's all sorts of different videos that you can find on YouTube. You have people who, you know, post just videos of them talking about things. There's, you know, TV shows that are on there, music videos, all sorts of different things that you can find on YouTube, but it is videos. Instagram, I think someone mentioned that one, is another social media company. It is primarily pictures, so people take pictures of themselves, often times very staged, with text or captions, and you can also put short videos on there. Another social media company that's kind of a relative newcomer to the scene is TikTok, which is just for short videos, and that's one that, again, is probably a little more popular these days with younger people. So I wouldn't know anything about it, being an old person myself. But yeah, you can post short videos on there, a lot of musical content, things like that. All right, so what do all of these companies have in common? Any ideas on that? Any things that they share? What do all those companies have in common?
Advertising.
Advertising, yes. We'll come back to that in 1 second. You have read my mind. Anything else that they share? Anything else that you see in common between them?
Connection to a large group of people.
Okay, yeah. And one of the things that you'll also see is not just to a large group of people, but within most of those or many of those social media companies, you also get kind of smaller subgroups. So people can be on Facebook, but then also be in separate groups in Facebook that kind of let them belong to a little bit more of a smaller community as well. Anything else? Any other ideas? Okay. So yeah, the thing that I want to focus on is the fact that with as with all businesses, their goal is to make money, right? Those are all organizations, they're all companies. They're not charities or organizations that are just out there because they want people to communicate with each other. All of those companies are out there because they want to try and make money. We live in capitalist society. That's what they do. But the question is, how do they do that? They don't charge users for their service, right? If you have a phone, you can download the Facebook app for free or the Instagram app, whatever it is you want to use, and get right on there without paying any money. Or you can, open up your computer and on your internet browser, just go to facebook.com and you're on, and they don't charge you for it. So the question is, how do they make money? As someone mentioned, they make their money through advertising. So here's my question. So let's say you're an advertiser, you're another company that sells, whatever, jeans or cookies or whatever it is that you want to get people to buy. And you are thinking about advertising on a social media company. And so you're going to pay Facebook or whoever to post your ad on there. So my question is, do you want to pay to have people see your ads for shorter periods of time or longer periods of time? Which would be better? If you're someone advertising on Facebook or wherever.
I would say longer.
Yeah, right. You want people to look at your ad, even if it's just on the side of their screen or, wherever the top of their search results on Google, people to see it for a longer amount of time, right? If you're going to pay for it, you want to get your money's worth. Similarly, do you want more people to see your ads or fewer people? If you're an advertiser.
More.
Yeah, again, you're paying for it. The more people see your ad, the more potential people will buy your product, which is ultimately what you're looking for because you want to make money too. So the question is, how do you get people to stay on your ads for longer periods of time? And how do they get more people to see the ads? Because as Facebook or Google or whoever it is that's charging for the ads, if people don't feel like they're getting their money's worth from the advertisements that they're paying for on Google or Facebook, they'll go somewhere else, right? We paid $500 to put our ad up on Facebook and only 3 people saw it. You're not getting a good return on investment there. So if you're Facebook or Google or YouTube or whoever, how do you get more people to see ads, and how do you get them to see ads for longer periods of time? So the answer is engagement, right? So you want to keep users, that's us, on your app or your program or your website as long as possible, right? The more they stay on there, the more videos they watch, the more posts they read, things like that, the more opportunities they have to view ads, the more, the longer they will see those ads that are on there. So if you can prove, if you're Google or Facebook or whoever, and you can prove to advertisers who are paying money to be on your site, look, the average person spends an hour a day on YouTube, or the average person spends 2 hours a day on Facebook. The longer time that they spend on your apps, the more advertisers will consider it worth their money to spend their advertising money on your site. So you want to make sure that you're keeping users as engaged as possible with your site. The longer they stay on, the more advertisers you get and the more money you can make. So the question is, how do you keep people on your site for as long as possible? Particularly in the days today of short attention spans and, all that sort of thing. So what you do is you give people what they want. It's very easy, right? If you keep people entertained, you give them what they want, they're more likely to stay on there and stay on the site longer, and you make more money off your advertisers. So how do they know? How does Google know? How does Facebook know what their users want? And the answer, besides giving away cookies, are little bits of information that are called cookies. And so cookies are basically little pieces of information that get stored on your computer as you're browsing around the internet or your phone or iPad, whatever device you're using. As you browse around the internet or as you go on Facebook and you look at different people's posts and different companies' posts and all those listicles and things like that, Facebook keeps track of all of the things that you look at. They know what you're viewing on their pages. And similarly, Google does the same thing. They keep track of all the pages of all the things that you search for. They keep track of the pages that you visit, things like that. So they have this information about what you're doing on their app or on their website. So the question is, what do they do with that information? So they know what you're looking at. They know what you've seen. They know what you've searched for. And yes, privacy is definitely an issue. But what do they do with it? So all of those organizations, all these social media companies have what are called algorithms that kind of run behind the scenes in their apps or their websites. And the algorithm is basically a program that's set up kind of behind the scenes in order to kind of get you what you're looking for. So they take all these things that you look at and all the searches you do, all the pages you view, all the other people's profiles that you look at, music videos you watch, all those things, and they put them all together and they decide based on these things that you've looked at before and that you've searched for before, here are some other things that you would like. So that's kind of one of the things that's kind of interesting about Facebook is we go on Facebook and we open it up and we look at our feed and we think, or at least it appears like I'm only seeing kind of I'm seeing the most recent posts, but that's not the way Facebook works. What they do is they provide you in that feed with the posts that they think you will most want to see. Not necessarily the most recent or even all of the things that your friends or the organizations that you're following or your groups have posted. They're only going to show you the things that they think you will most like to see. You can go in and change that in their settings, but the basic default is that setting where they're going to provide your feed based on those cookies and those algorithms. They're going to provide you with things that are similar to what you've seen before and what they think you will want to see, because that way, as I mentioned before, they can keep you hooked. You'll keep seeing, oh, that is an article that I'm interested in. I'm going to click on that because it's similar to those things that I've looked at and read before. I'm not going to read through all this, but it's here if you want to take a look at it. But this is what Google says on their information page about the algorithm that they use. So they have, again, they take all the things that you've searched for before. They factor in, all the different characteristics of the websites that are in the results. And then they provide you those results based on this algorithm that they have running behind the scenes that, again, takes into weight a whole bunch of different factors. So that algorithm really is what decides when you do a search on Google what your results turn out to be. So in a more practical sense, what does that mean? So again, as I mentioned, the more you view particular things on an app or a site or on the internet in general, the more they give you results that match what you have looked for before. And that's called a filter bubble. So they have, you kind of can get locked into this mode where the things that you're seeing are very similar to the things you've already seen. It can be very hard to break out and find other points of view or other results that are different from the ones that you've seen before. And one of the results of that you see is you get what's called an echo chamber. And you see this on social media a lot, where you are friends with a particular set of people or you belong to certain organizations that are very similar to your own point of view. And so you wind up getting this kind of feedback loop where you only see the same information and you're putting that information out and you're getting the same kind of information back. And there's not any outside different sets of facts or information that can break into that. So you get, again, this kind of feedback loop that feeds into itself based on these algorithms and the things that you've searched for and done before. Does anybody have any questions about anything so far? I've kind of run through a lot here. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you comment on posts, for instance, on Facebook, or you like something, or you
Mhm.
use the angry emoji, how does that play into the algorithm?
Again, I don't know exactly how it does that, but in general, like when you like things, it'll take note of the things that you've liked, and that can feed back into the kinds of things that they do show you in the future. So if you like a post from a particular organization, say, then you're more likely to either get posts, or again, remember how I mentioned it a little bit earlier, how your Facebook feed, when you open it up, isn't necessarily the most recent posts or a comprehensive list of posts. It's the ones that Facebook thinks that you want to see. So if you like a post or that sort of thing, or react to something from an organization or an individual, then they're going to take that into account. And next time when you open up Facebook and you get your list there, or your feed, you're going to be more likely to see posts from that organization or even that individual. So if my friend keeps posting pictures of her puppies on Facebook and I like them every time, I'm going to keep seeing that friend's posts. And then similarly, if I keep liking posts of puppies or things like that, then Facebook might continue to show me other people who are posting pictures of their dogs, or they will show me other organizations. You might like Greenville Animal Rescue or something like that. So they'll give me those suggestions that relate to interests of the things that I've liked before. And one of the things that you may have noticed sometimes, if you're on if you're shopping, for instance, and you search for a new pair of running shoes, you'll come back and you'll start seeing ads on your feed for running shoes. And that's not a coincidence. Again, they're keeping track through cookies of those things that you're searching for and those things that you're doing on the internet, and they're trying to provide you with those things that you have searched for before. And again, that's one of the things that they do for advertisers too. And that's one of the things that advertisers love about Facebook and other social media sites, is they have all of your demographic information, right? Facebook knows when I signed up for an account, I told them how old I am. I told them, who I am. They know where I live. If I put what my job is on there, they know that. There's places on your profile where you can put your interests, things like that. So advertisers love it because they can say to Facebook, I want to target just males who are ages 30 to 40, who live in Greenville, South Carolina, who like running, right? So they can target their ads very specifically to people who they know will be interested in their product. So that's another thing, again, with that, Facebook doesn't charge for you to get on there, but they get that information from you that they can then use to turn around and monetize their advertising. Any other questions? Okay. I want to take a quick look here at a video that kind of really demonstrates how this kind of filter bubble, excuse me, and echo chamber works. And it's from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is an anti-hate crime organization. And it relates to something that happened here in South Carolina a little bit ago. So I'm going to bring that up here and we'll watch that. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long.
How does a child become a killer? How did Dylan Roof go from a little boy who wasn't raised in a racist home, from someone who had black friends, to someone who murdered 9 African Americans while they were praying historic black church. Part of the answer lies in the story of how fragile minds can be shaped by Google's search algorithm. Dylan Roof posted a manifesto on the web a few months before his murderous rampage. He said that he didn't grow up in a racist home or environment. The event that awakened him to racial issues, he said.
Jed, for whatever reason, the video is not displaying right now.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Should be able to fix that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll switch over to here.
Good now.
Child
Okay,
become a killer. How did Dylan Roof go from a little boy who wasn't raised in a racist home, from someone who had black friends, to someone who murdered 9 African Americans while they were praying at a historic black church? Part of the answer lies in the story of how fragile minds can be shaped by Google's search algorithm. Dylan Roof posted a manifesto on the web a few months before his murderous rampage. He said that he didn't grow up in a racist home or environment. The event that awakened him to racial issues, he said, was the Trayvon Martin case.
I kept hearing and seeing his name and eventually decided to look him up. I read the Wikipedia article and right away I was unable to understand what the big deal was. It was obvious that Zimmerman was in the right. But more importantly, this prompted me to type in the words black on white crime into Google, and I have never been the same since that day. The first website I came to was the Council of Conservative Citizens. There were pages upon pages of these brutal black on white murders. I was in disbelief. At this moment I realized that something was very wrong. How could the news media be blowing up the Trayvon Martin case while hundreds of these black on white murders got ignored?
Had Roof first come to another website, history might have been different. He might have learned the truth instead of the racist lies pushed by the Council of Conservative Citizens. And the truth is that the vast majority of white people who are murdered are killed by other white people, not by black people as the Council's website suggests. The Council's site wasn't the only one peddling misleading statistics when Roof Googled black on white crime. In fact, the amount of interest in 2013 in this topic, stoked by white supremacist propagandizing, actually created a cyber cascade on this subject, linking Roof to these proliferating hate materials. Because of the way Google's algorithm works, Roof's search results were dominated by racist misinformation. The truth was submerged. Google likes to present itself as though it's the new library for the world. It says that its algorithm uses a set of signals to determine how trustworthy, reputable, or authoritative a source is. But whether because Google's algorithm is flawed, or because it is easily manipulated by those well-versed in search optimization, it apparently didn't present trustworthy, reputable, or authoritative information to Roof. Say I were to walk into a library and ask for information on black on white crime. Well, there wouldn't be a whole section filled with white supremacist books that a librarian would point me to. Instead, a librarian would probably lead me to the FBI's crime statistics. That's not necessarily what happens when Google is my library. And it gets worse the more I use Google's library. In an attempt to cater to our preferences and ultimately to monetize them, Google's algorithm keeps giving us more and more of what we search for. And what Roof came to want as he was being miseducated was proof of an epidemic of black murders of whites, happily provided by America's white supremacists. Another site that Roof came to was stormfront.org, the oldest hate site on the web. It's filled with racist and anti-Semitic materials shared by more than 300,000 registered users from around the world. Here, Roof found himself in a world of black on white crime, a major topic on Stormfront. We know this because Roof posted on the site. Roof also found the Daily Stormer, a cesspool of anti-black and anti-Semitic materials that calls itself the premier alt-right site. He posted there as well. And in the world in which he found himself, thanks to Google, there was little to counter the racist propaganda that dominated his search results. Roof was fed and ate up a lie. The problems with Google's algorithm aren't confined to the issue of crime. The same happens when searching about Islam, or did the Holocaust happen? Last February, staff from the Southern Poverty Law Center visited Google and demonstrated that when one ran searches for Martin Luther King Jr., hate sites were at the top of the page. They included martinlutherking.org, run by the racists at Stormfront. Google told us that it couldn't alter its algorithm, but shortly after our visit, the search results for Martin Luther King seemed to change. And there have been a few other instances when Google appears to have tweaked its algorithm to avoid embarrassing results. A few years ago, it was pointed out that if you typed Jew or Jewish into Google, all you got was anti-Semitic arguments on the evils of Jews and why they should be exterminated. Google apparently tweaked its algorithm to fix that. Google also probably tweaked its algorithm when Google Maps was manipulated and the White House was renamed with a racist term. But if Google is to live up to its claim that its algorithm delivers trustworthy, reputable, and authoritative results, Google has much more work to do. As the path Dylan Roof followed when he first typed the words black on white crime into Google's powerful search engine proves, there is a danger that the fragile-minded, the impressionable, and the young may find themselves in a world dominated by misinformation and hate. It's a fundamental problem that Google must address if it is to truly be the world's library.
Okay. Any questions about the video there? Okay. I'm going to jump back to PowerPoint here. Okay. So the question is, how do you recognize if you're in an echo chamber, if you have kind of been caught into one of these kind of feedback loops where you're kind of being really restricted to one perspective on an issue? So the first thing to look at is really just to look at of all the posts that I'm seeing, or the anything along those lines, am I only seeing one perspective on this issue? Is there really only one side that's being presented? And that's kind of a strong characteristic of this. Another thing to look at is that viewpoint being supported by rumor or incomplete evidence? Are people not showing where they got their information from? Or are they saying, oh, I heard from my cousin that, you know, so-and-so happened, or things along those lines, where there's not, or a witness who is at the scene said so-and-so without actually providing any solid information about that. So look at, you know, are these things being supported by actual facts? And then if there is someone, happens to be someone in there who is presenting an alternate set of facts or presenting information that is contradicting what is being the main opinion that is on this particular location, is that being ignored or belittled? Are people not engaging with it? Again, even if facts are being presented in support of that position. So some things to be aware of. Again, if you think, is this a situation where I'm only seeing one perspective? These are some things to think about. So what are some things you can do if you have identified that you're caught in one of these echo chambers? What can you do to get out? So one of the things you can do is to check multiple news sources to ensure that you're getting complete objective information. And I'm going to show something in just a minute that will show you a number of different news organizations, and it'll kind of talk about, it'll show which ones are kind of more trustworthy in terms of the validity of the news they're presenting, as well as kind of where they fall on the political spectrum. So you want to think about looking at sources from across the political spectrum. I wouldn't advise going into things, into sites that are less factually based. But again, even with those ones that are factually based, you'll still see that range. And it's good to kind of look at some different ones to get that different point of view on things. Another good thing to do is interact with people with different perspectives. And make sure that when you do interact with them, that you're not just trying to push your opinion on them, that you're listening to what they're saying. If there are facts that they're presenting, they're supporting their position, look at them, take those things into account. And this one can be tough. Unfortunately, one of the kind of aspects of modern society is that people often kind of wind up being self-segregated in terms of, the people that they know in terms of class, race, religious background. We often are mostly associate with people who have similar backgrounds to us. So it can be hard to find those people who do have different perspectives. But seeking those people out and taking the opportunity to talk and listen with them can be very helpful in terms of finding a different perspective. And if you're on social media sites, if you can follow people who do present a different perspective from you, or friend people who have a different perspective from you, that's going to kind of break that feedback loop where you're only seeing the same type of information coming through your feed. You'll start to get some different points of view into your feed. Another thing to be aware of is confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is something that all of us are guilty of, where we basically only search for and find information that kind of supports what we already think we believe or that we think we know. So a lot of the times, if we come across information, even if it is factual, that doesn't correspond to our worldview or what we think to be true, we'll discount it. So being aware that we as human beings do that can be a good way to kind of break out of that echo chamber and be aware that there are things out there that are different from what I believe, and some of the things that I believe may not be true. Going back to the first point here, checking multiple news sources, I do want to touch on that a little bit further and kind of talk about that. This chart that I have a link to, which I'll show you in just a minute, is going to show you some kind of different biases. And one of the things that you'll see on there that's is kind of this idea of new media versus traditional media. And by traditional media, I mean kind of the newspapers, the kind of pre-internet media. So newspapers, TV news, things like that. And I think one of the main differences between those things is that in some ways there's kind of an accountability that exists with traditional media that doesn't necessarily exist with some of the things that you'll see on the internet. If your cousin has a YouTube page and is posting videos about things, that doesn't necessarily, he's not bound by the same rules as a newspaper or a TV channel. And so those things, there doesn't have to be fact, there doesn't have to be corroboration. I can basically, on the internet, I can say whatever I want. And it's essentially, I'm allowed to do that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here in just a minute. But those traditional media places like newspapers and magazines and TV news, while they do have opinion segments, certainly, they also are bound by certain rules about the factuality of the things they present. And when they break those rules, they can potentially be subject to legal consequences. They can be sued for, defamy and things like that, libel and slander. So there are some rules that make those, in most cases, that make those traditional media sites, in some ways, I would say, a little bit more trustworthy. Let's take a look real quick at this media bias, and I'm going to have to jump out of the PowerPoint here for a minute and go back to my browser to show you this. Hold on just a moment. Okay, so this is a media bias chart that was kind of put together, and they talk about some of the methodology that they used for this. But you'll see they have it broken down. So the top top to bottom is based on reliability. So the more reliable a news site is, the higher up on the chart it will be. The less reliable it is in terms of the factualness of it, the farther down on the chart it will be. So that's one part of it. And then the other part of it is political bias. And they have that divided, not surprisingly, by right and left. So things to the left of the screen, on the left side of the screen, are more on the left, the more liberal side, and the things on the right are on the more conservative side. So they have combined this, the bias along with the reliability, and you can kind of decide where things fall based on those. So if you're looking for just kind of straightforward information with that is as reliable as possible with the least amount of political bias as possible, then this top middle section of the chart is kind of the resources that you want to look at for those things that are going to be fairly reliable, fairly unbiased. And they have a pretty good list of resources here. AP, of course. They do put the Weather Channel on there. That is pretty unbiased. They report the weather. You know, things like NPR, UPI, The Hill is a website that reports on political stuff. So again, if you're not sure about, you know, a news story or how bias might play out into a particular story, these are sites that you can go to that are going to be less biased and fairly reliable in terms of presenting actual facts. So if you see something on your Facebook feed where your uncle says, well, my friend who was at this event said that this happened, and you're like, that seems a little sketchy, one of these sites is a good place to go to really find out the facts and the information about what happened. And then as you go down into the less reliable section, you'll see some other things. And, you know, again, we have on both sides of the political spectrum that are less reliable and more extreme in their partisanship. And again, all those, not sure what I hit there. Those are kind of charted out in this media bias chart. Any questions about that?
Is it possible to get a copy of that?
The link, I can put the link up in the comments, or Nathaniel can probably do that, I think.
Okay.
And then you'll just be able to click on that. I don't think they have a hard copy of it, but you should be able to click on it from that comment section. Give me 1 second, and I will go ahead and post that for you once I switch back to the PowerPoint. Any other questions? Actually, I could probably do it right here. Let's do that. So I'll just copy that. Nope, doesn't want to bring the chat up for you. Okay. Yeah, I'll post that in just a minute. Any other questions about the media bias chart there? Okay. Oh, there we go. All right, so I just put that link up in the chat, so you can click on it right from that chat there, and you should be able to take a look at that. Okay, so being aware of the media bias is important. Another thing in general, like again, you're on your Facebook page and your uncle posts this article that says something that seems like it might be a little bit fishy or not entirely factual based. There's some kind of quick steps you can do to make sure that what that news piece is saying is in fact factually accurate and something that can be relied upon. So first of all, read the whole article. One of the things that you'll see on Facebook and you know a lot of social media sites is the articles that get posted have very sensational headlines, because if the headline is sensational, then they're trying to get people to click on that so that, again, they're relying, the news sites or whatever site it is that posting that article is relying on advertising usually as well. So the more people go to their site, the more the advertising they can get and things like that. So they create these sensational headlines that direct people to their site to read the article, and those headlines can sometimes be a little bit misleading. So when you do see a sensational headline about something, you do want to make sure that you read the whole article to make sure that what the article is actually saying is backed up by, or that what the headline is saying is actually backed up by the article. Another thing that you'll see sometimes that happens is articles kind of get recirculated. So an article from something that happened a couple years ago will get reposted and go back around, make the rounds again on Facebook, and it seems sensational, but it's really about something that happened a while ago. So be aware of that as kind of a tactic. Another thing you can do is check the sources. If you want to kind of go to the next level, check the sources named in the article. So sometimes articles refer to, this study or that study, things like that. So if you want to make sure that that study is really saying what the article is saying that study is saying, go ahead and take a look on the internet and see if you can find that actual study, and does it in fact support what the authors are claiming that it says. Another thing you can do is find other original articles about the same topic. And I have highlighted original here because another thing that happens on the internet a lot is someone will post an article and then other people will copy and paste selected parts of that one article in blog posts or in other social media posts and things like that. And it looks like it's a different article, but it's really essentially the same one as before. And you can see oftentimes it'll be copied and pasted word for word. You'll see that exact information on what looks like a different article from the original one. So you want to look for other original articles that are covering the same topic. Are there other people who are reporting on that same thing? If there's only one article that's circulating about a particular topic or about something that happened, it's unlikely that that is the definitive take on what actually happened. Another thing to think about is who wrote that piece that you're looking at. Is it someone who has written other things? Is it someone who has authority on the topic? Because oftentimes that can be revealing. Is it someone, again, just some random Joe Blow on the internet who likes to repost things from other sites? Where did that story come from? So finding information out about the author can be useful as well. And then finally, another good option is using a fact-checking site. And some people like to claim, fact-checking sites are biased because they present the facts. In general, you can trust fact-checking sites. The ones that, I tend to use frequently are factcheck.org, Snopes, PolitiFact. They tend to be fairly reliable. All of those sites will also link out to their original sources. So if they say this is the fact, they will link out to the place where they got that information, oftentimes another primary source or a reliable news source. So again, if something seems like it's somewhat improbable, you can use one of these fact-checking sites to do that. My mother-in-law loves posting stories that are not factually accurate, and I oftentimes will say, hey, you should look at the fact-checking site about that thing you posted on Facebook because it's not really true. So fact-checking sites can be, I would say, are typically pretty reliable and can be a good way to kind of verify whether something's accurate or not. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about real briefly is a few legal things that people sometimes bring up in relation to social media sites. So one of the things that you hear about a lot with social media sites is First Amendment rights. And I've copied the First Amendment up there, First Amendment to the Constitution, kind of a big deal. But here's the thing, right? So it says, Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of religion, yada, 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 abridging the freedom of speech. So the main thing here that is important is that the First Amendment only protects against the government blocking free speech. It does not apply to private companies like social media companies. Social media companies can indeed block people if they want to. They can remove people from their platforms. They can delete posts. They are allowed to do that. Congress can't say that Facebook has to delete posts or things along those lines. But Facebook itself, as a private company, is allowed to remove things if they'd like. They users of those organizations, of those companies, are not protected by the First Amendment. Another thing that has come up a lot recently is Section 230, and that's 47 U.S. Code Section 230, which applies to social media companies as well. And there's two parts to this that are particularly relevant to social media companies. The first one is the number one here, that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. And then the second part here in 2A is that it says that they shall not be held liable for restricting access to or availability of material that the provider, that would be Facebook or whoever, or user considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, et cetera, et cetera. So what does this mean? So the first part that I mentioned means that social media companies are not legally liable for content posted by their users. If I go on Facebook and I post something that makes people angry or that people have a problem with, Facebook is not liable for that. They can't be sued by someone. If I go on Facebook and, slander somebody or whatever it is, Facebook can't be sued for that by that person. They're not liable for information that I, a user of Facebook or Twitter or whatever, post on there. And then the second part of this is that social media companies are allowed, as it says, to remove posts. So it explicitly says in that Section 230 that they are allowed to remove posts. There is not that First Amendment protection on social media. So there's been a lot of talk recently about, some people have called for repealing Section 230 that we just talked about. Any thoughts about kind of this idea of repealing this? Are there any pluses or minuses that you could see to that? If it were,
What would be the consequences? Oh, yeah, I see that. What would be the consequences if this was repealed? What would those be?
Well,
It
that's what
sounds like-
do you have any ideas?
It doesn't sound to, it sounds to me like it's something that should be kept in place, but I'm not that familiar with this, so.
Could be held liable for content posted by the user. Let's say I posted something.
Yeah, so in other words, if you posted something on Facebook, then Facebook would be liable if that was not accurate? Is that what
Right.
would
So if I
happen?
said, let's go. Right. Yeah, exactly. So if I said, let's go burn down the library, let's get this group together and go burn down the library. And we got a bunch of people together and we burned down the library. If they didn't have this protection, then Facebook could be potentially liable for citing this type of action, right?
Yeah. Sounds like it should stay in place to me.
Any other ideas about Section 230? Any other thoughts, like plus or minus? Okay. So yeah, I think certainly, some of these protections are important for the way that social media companies operate. Again, if someone posts things
I'm not hearing you. Are you speaking?
What's that?
I'm not here. Okay, I wasn't hearing you for a while.
Yeah, Jed, we seem to have lost audio for a second. I don't know if you can still hear us.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me, but I'm in a separate room on a separate
Yes,
computer.
okay.
And Jed just got knocked off, so.
Uh-oh.
Well, we'll see. Hopefully he'll be able to get back on. We might have just had a little bit of an internet glitch. Any other thoughts? Just kind of going back to that last part, just because I've been paying attention to it. And this is Nathaniel, by the way. For those of you who don't know me, I am the digital literacy coordinator here at the library system. So I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking about social media and how we interact with social media. Going back to those, I can't remember which section he just said it is, but one of the big consequences that social media companies in particular are worried about, and basically have said the reason why they are so in favor of that section, is that without that section, they basically just wouldn't be able to function as a business, because they would be faced with such ceaseless litigation for anything, whether it's legitimate litigation or not. Any comment, anything that anyone said could potentially come back to saying, well, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whomever is responsible for that. And basically they would just be forced to close their services entirely via litigation. It certainly is an area of discussion in legal areas, just because, but there's Jed, now he's back on, but he's muted, so we can't hear him yet.
Sorry about that. Appear to have had a little bit of trouble there. Okay. Let me go back to my screen sharing. Okay. So the last thing that I want to talk about briefly is this idea of net neutrality. That's another kind of term that's been thrown around a little bit recently in relation to social media and other kind of websites and things like that. So net neutrality is this idea that internet service providers, as they're known, ISPs, and those are usually cable companies these days in America. That's the way most of us get our internet, or phone companies, should provide internet equally both to hosts of websites and to consumers. And that's that neutrality part of it there. So the idea being that otherwise the ISPs could charge internet users more for faster speed. So only people with more money could get good access to the internet. And then on the flip side of that, they could charge website hosts to have their sites accessible at higher speeds. So if Netflix wants people to be able to stream their movies, they would have to pay an extra fee to their internet service providers in order to make sure they get access to those faster speeds. And so, technically that could mean that, smaller websites who can't afford to pay those extra fees would be slowed down. People wouldn't be able to access their sites at the same high speeds that they do the bigger organizations that could afford to pay for those higher speeds. And then similarly, ISPs can slow down or block sites that promote ideas and content they don't like. So if an internet service provider decided, you know what, we don't like Facebook, or, we don't like, say, the New York Times, they've been writing things against AT&T and we don't like them anymore, we're going to make it so that anyone who has AT&T internet can't view the New York Times. That could be potentially something that could happen if that net neutrality is not protected. One of the questions that's come up is, should the internet be regulated like other utilities, right? When you go to Duke Energy and you sign up for electrical service, it costs you the same amount as it costs everybody else. It's not like they charge people in one neighborhood more for electricity than they charge people in another neighborhood. So they've made it so that, you know, there's that equal access. Does anybody have any thoughts about that with net neutrality? Do you think it should be treated like other utilities, or is internet different from those other things, and it should be okay for those service providers to maybe have more freedom in terms of what they want to do with regulating the service they provide? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I would argue that the internet access should be treated as a utility.
Mhm.
At least now it should. When it first began, it was a little more specialized tool, but with all that's required to live life in the modern world, you are in pretty sad shape if you don't have internet access.
Mhm.
So it becomes a more basic need that needs to be met.
Like water or heat or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
good
I would
point.
work also. You know, some people can't do their jobs without it these days. So
Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder if with the pandemic, attitudes toward this issue have changed, given that obviously many more people are doing work from home and kids are doing school from home, and you know, if they don't have access to those high speeds, then that could create a lot of problems with those sorts of things. I think the pandemic has raised a lot of issues in terms of equal access to the internet, not just in terms of speed, but in terms of, you know, who has internet in general. And that's kind of raised a whole other host of issues in terms of, you know, should we have, you know, what are responsibilities of either cities or government in general to provide internet like a utility to all the citizens? Okay, that's about all I have. Thank you all for coming. I'm just going to have a few quick slides here just at the end, wrap up. If you do have interest in any future virtual events, hopefully enjoyed this one, feel free to go ahead and sign up for our future events. I'm also going to take some questions here in just a minute if anyone has any post-presentation questions. And ironically, please follow us on social media. Yeah, again, library does have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram pages, and it's a good way to keep up with programs, things that are going on in the library, events, etc. So please feel free to follow us and be aware that we will then be in your feed. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one question about when you just mentioned being in someone's feed. I have a very small account. It was just because I happened to move here from out of town, out of state, and I set it up so my friends back home could follow me and I could follow them. And I started getting all of these people following me who didn't know me and really didn't seem to have anything to do with what I did. And I talked to a friend of mine who set it up for me, and she said, "Oh, that's just coming from your feed. Don't worry about it." But I got concerned because many of them were from other countries, other languages. They were posting pictures and captions that I couldn't understand. And I finally blocked them and made my account private. Because I couldn't figure out why any of these people would be interested in what I was posting anyway. But I don't know what that means. You know, don't worry about it because it's only coming from your feed. And she said they weren't specifically picking you out.
Right. What social media site did you say that was on?
Instagram.
Okay. So yeah, I think you raise a couple of good points there. I think the first one is about privacy settings. And that's a good point that if I do this presentation again, I'll be sure to include back in there. That almost all of these social media sites, almost all, have various privacy settings that you can go into and allow you to change it so that, for instance, you only see the posts that you make are only visible to friends that you have approved, and things along those lines. So definitely, I would say always, whenever you sign up for a social media site, make sure that you check those privacy settings and that you're happy with the way that they're set, such that you're not revealing private information to people that you don't want to see it. And then I think the other thing is, again, yeah, that's there are, and this was, I think, more of an issue earlier, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe and it is still, I think, prevalent on some social media sites where you get basically bots that are computer programs, and they're not real accounts, but they're on these, they're set up by various organizations, whoever it may be. And so they go around and kind of just pick up, friend people or follow them or whatever it may be. And they're basically just trying to extend their reach, whether it's for, monetary gain or some other reason. They're basically just trying to have as many people see the information that they're putting out as possible. Any other questions? I'm going to sit here awkwardly for 1 minute to make sure that I don't miss out on anyone who does have questions before I end the presentation. No takers, that's okay too. All right, I've sat here awkwardly long enough. Thank you very much for coming. And again, hopefully we'd love to see you at more library programs. And there's the email address right down there. If you do have any other questions, you can certainly email in there. And we'll be able to happy to help you out. Any questions about specific social media sites or things you can do, we're happy to help you out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.